Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Today, we meet a world champion mountain biker, professional athlete, motivational speaker, adventurer, author, and coach. I didn't mention vegan, but you know she'll tell us all about that. Someone that has a personal motto of be brave and do epic shit. How can we not ask Sonya LOONEY on the show? Sonya, welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And I've got to tell you how I actually came across you. It was sort of interesting. I moved to Hong Kong about 3 years ago and about to move away actually to New York. But I arrived here and didn't know anyone and took my daughter to the park, and she loves jumping in muddy puddles. She was about 2 at the time and was jumping around. It got totally wet feet. And so I thought I better take my socks off and put them on her feet. I didn't even think about what my socks might say on them. And they actually said, do epic shit. And they were these defeat socks. And so I put them on her legs and pulled them up. I didn't even read them. And then all these mothers were starting pointing at her feet. And it wasn't the best way to introduce myself to the mothers of town. But I then found out a bit more about you through a friend who is a big plant-based eater and also a really great cyclist. And then I put 2 and 2 together and realized that they were your no epic shit socks.
Yeah, that's super funny.
So yeah, thanks for that. I don't know if I should thank you or not. I love the socks. And funnily enough, I still have them 3 years later and they look new. Your sponsors are obviously doing something right.
Yeah, there's plenty more opportunity for those socks to get you in trouble with the moms on the playground or otherwise.
Exactly. But I love your motto. And I guess I just wanted to sort of start there and ask you, so what's your philosophy? Where does that motto fit in and where are you coming from?
Yeah, so initially it started with just do epic shit, but then I started just thinking about what that means. And my life's goal through my career as a cyclist has been just to continually push my limits and to take on challenges that will really push me and just make me, I don't know, suffer is the wrong word, but just take me to those places where you have to figure out who you are and what you're all about. Because in our daily lives, we don't often put ourselves in those situations, and they don't have to be uncomfortable, but just situations outside your comfort zone where you're like, okay, I have some decisions to make about my attitude or about what I'm going to do next or about how I'm going to ask for help. And I think that doing those things and challenging yourself, it doesn't have to be a bike race, it could be anything, but just challenging yourself really teaches you how to handle the little things in your everyday life. And it also gives you the confidence to take on things and just be the person that you want to be without sounding too cliche.
Awesome. And look, I know you could do anything. I know you're a qualified engineer. So where and how did you become going from a qualified engineer to a professional mountain biker?
That was really funny, Ali. So I actually wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to be an engineer, but when I was in school, in high school, I loved math and science, and all of my family basically are engineers. So they're like, oh, you should be an engineer because it's easy to get a job. It's good job security. So when I was like 17, 18 years old, I thought, great, I'll just go to school. I'll get a job. I'll buy a house, the whole 9 yards. But then once I went to college and moved away from my parents and started doing different things, I realized that's not necessarily what I wanted. But I was committed to going through school. And I ended up finding bike racing because I started running marathons and going to the gym when I was a senior in high school, grade 12. I was picked on a lot in school and people bullied me a lot. And when I started running, people started treating me differently because I found some confidence in myself. So I was running a lot and I ended up injuring myself and going to spin class at the gym. And then from there, someone invited me to go mountain biking. And 2 weeks later, I did my first race. And I tend to go all in when I really like something. So I went all in. So I was going to school. I was a junior in college, 3rd year in college. And that's when I found mountain biking. And then I decided to apply to graduate school at University of Colorado in Boulder because I didn't want to have an inflexible schedule if I went and got a job right away. And fortunately, I had really good grades and the program really wanted me. So I got an awesome fellowship into grad school. So I entered the PhD program in electrical engineering, and I was able to have a flexible enough schedule so that I could pursue bike racing on the side. And soon my side hustle, I worked as a solar engineer after that. My side hustle of bike racing ended up becoming my main gig. And that was because I didn't give up on it. Like a lot of times when people have goals, they give up too soon. And I did it in a roundabout way, which we can talk about in a little bit, but it took creativity and it took an open mind and it took a willingness to change paths. And it's hard to change paths sometimes once we've committed to something.
Yeah, and I imagine you got a fair bit of sort of interesting response from maybe even close family and friends saying, why are you giving all this up? And tell us a bit more about this roundabout way that got you there full time.
So I was doing engineering and I was never passionate about it. And all the way through school, I just knew that it was not the thing that I loved. So it's hard as a bike racer. Most professional mountain bikers and professional cyclists don't make enough money or don't make any money, especially not to live. So I had a blog, and this was in 2007, and I wrote a review about a backpack that I liked. And I didn't do Google Analytics. I just was doing my blog for fun. And it turned out lots of people read my blog, and I didn't know that. So it sent a lot of traffic to this website, this brand Ergon that I was promoting because I liked the backpack. And then the company contacted me and invited me to be on their mountain bike team. And that was a really big deal at the time because I was still buying my bikes. I was still very, very grassroots. So that was a big step in the right direction. And then from there, they started asking me to do marketing projects for them. And it got to the point where I couldn't be an engineer anymore and race my bike and do this marketing side gig. So they ended up hiring me to be their national sales and marketing manager. And I traveled the United States doing clinics at bike shops and helping build the brand in the United States with another guy. I did that for 5 years. And so I learned a lot about what it means to be a true brand ambassador for a company, and that it's not just about racing and race results. And I also learned about marketing and how to build a brand. So all of those things really helped me get to where I'm at today.
Yeah. So where did you go from there? You had that 5-year experience, and then did you just how did you financially support yourself after that, being sort of full-time cycling?
There was no real room for growth in my career anymore where I was working. And I also had moved to Canada, so it also was going to make things more difficult for me. Like, my employer was willing to keep me on board, but it was just a good time for me to split. And a year before that, multiple brands had approached me and asked me if they could sponsor me, which was really neat because this was, I guess, 5 years ago, 2012. So social media is definitely hitting its stride, and I was definitely an early adopter in that because I really loved interacting with all the different people, and I loved being a resource for people. So brands had been approaching me, but the team I was on was tied to my job as well. And I couldn't take on any of these sponsors because it conflicted with my team, but my team wasn't paying me any money. So it was a really difficult thing. So my husband, I guess he was my boyfriend at the time, he said, like, screw it. Start your own thing, like write all your own proposals. You know exactly what to do. So he empowered me to go on my own and to try to just be a professional cyclist through what I knew about marketing and building brands. So I did just that, and I have some great support, and I ended up doing way better than I thought. And I think that kind of reshaping what it means to be a professional athlete, I was an early adopter of that, of, hey, it's not just about going fast and standing on top of a podium. There's a lot more involved. It's about growing the sport. It's about empowering others. It's about being your own media company. And it's about how you're going to help your partners grow their brand through yours.
Yeah, it's a full business, isn't it? So did you ever sort of wish that you were paid like a male road cyclist?
No, and I've never even thought of that until you mentioned it right now. Because male road cyclists, again, it's all about just going fast and standing on top of a podium. And while I do line up and race to win every single time, I would be bored out of my mind if I just had to ride my bike and race. And I love the growth opportunities that I've had to learn and to learn how to run a business and to learn all these new things about marketing and the opportunity to connect with other people. So if I was just racing to go fast, that would be my primary purpose in life, would be I'm going to be the fastest cyclist in the world. But that wasn't my primary purpose, and that isn't my primary purpose. My primary purpose is to help people live better and help give people the tools to do the things that they want to do, whether it's be a better cyclist or be an entrepreneur or be a better mom or dad. And I'm able to do that because I'm able to bike race, and that's my vehicle through which I can live by the standards that I believe in. And that's a great way to tell a story of how to do something that you believe in. So for me, that I think gives me a lot more fulfillment than just riding and going fast. So a lot of times I end up putting my business before my training, and I probably could be even faster than I am now, but that's not what would bring me joy, spending an extra 5 hours a week training or spending an extra 5 hours a week creating meaningful content that people can listen to or read or watch. And then they walk away at the end of the day feeling more motivated to do good things in the world. Like that's what it means to me to be a professional cyclist.
I think that's what really drew me to you as well, and I'm sure your listeners are the same. They just see this holistic approach and a balanced approach. And I actually really enjoyed your conversation on one of your podcasts talking about balance, and you sort of suggested that balance was more like a consciousness imbalance. And can you tell us a bit more about your sort of belief around balanced lifestyle?
Yeah, I think that trying to chase balance actually makes you more stressed out because balance implies a tightrope that you have to walk and you're going to fall on either side and it's going to be stressful and hard. So, I mean, I think that there's just times where you know that you're going to have to focus really hard on one thing and some of the other things have to slide a little bit. And then there's going to be times where you can focus on those other things. So, for example, right now it's November and is it December? No, it's still November.
Just
right now, I'm letting some of the business things, like I have a product line, I do tons of writing projects, I do a lot of my own photography. I'm letting all that stuff slide just a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit so that I can have more time to spend time with friends and family and to just have more downtime because throughout the year, I'm not complaining about it, but I work a lot of hours and I tend to push out my friends and my family, which is not a good quality. So I'm trying to make more time for that stuff. And it's hard because I know that I'm not accomplishing as much as I could in as short of a period of time as possible. So sometimes it's hard to trade that growth. But then if I take a step back, I actually feel a lot better. I feel happier and I'm probably even more efficient at the work that I am doing. So the premise of rest and the premise of taking that time for yourself and for human connection, like real human connection, not the internet, is super important. And I think that it does make you more efficient at the things you're actually doing too.
And do you find, Sonya, that you have to sort of almost schedule that within your training, within your year? Do you sort of look at a year approach with your training or do you have it like strategically planned out? How do you sort of approach it?
Yeah, so I race like 9 months out of the year. So usually it's about January through October. So I guess that's 10 months. So 9 to 10 months. But I don't actually race hard the entire time. So typically I'll do a couple months where I'm doing a lot of racing, and then I'll take a month where I'm allowed to focus more on my business, more on my friendships and family, and less on training. Because it's hard to train 3 to 4 hours a day and run a business and have family and cook and do everything. So I think that putting in that time, usually for a month in the spring and a month in the summer, I won't race at all. And I'll try to reduce my travel as well because travel isn't just for racing. Travel is for sponsors. Travel is for speaking. Travel is for cool projects that come up. So learning how to say no has been something that's been really challenging for me, but also something that after I do it, I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that, couldn't we? I like what you said there. You know, you do 4 hours of training and then you've got to fit everything else in. So I'm assuming that 4 hours of training every day isn't your typical year. What does it look like over time, or what does even a typical week of training look like for you?
Yeah, again, it's really periodized based on what my schedule is. So when I'm racing a lot, I'm training less because you have to be able to recover from your races, which mine are typically 7 days long. You have to be able to recover from the travel, and you also have to be able to recover from the amount of work that you're doing aside from just bike work or physical activity, because I work with a sports psychologist, and she's actually the first episode I ever did of my podcast. And the main thing that stuck with me in that show was she says, it's not about time management, it's about energy management. So there's times in the year where I'm really focused on training. Like right now, I'm really focused on training. And between cross training and bike time, I am training 3 to 4 hours a day with 1 day off of training per week. But then there's times in the year where I'm only training 7 hours a week. So really, it's about balancing it. When I'm not racing, I'm training more. And when I'm racing, I'm training less and focusing more on my business because I'm able to get away with that.
And so you mentioned now's, I guess, a fairly strong training period. What would a typical training week look like in terms of breaking that up with, say, strength training, riding, maybe some skiing, whatever else that you do?
Yeah, so my off season is typically 3 months over the winter. So November, December, and part of January. But this year, I am trying to incorporate more cross training. And in the past, I would do running and a few things, but not a lot of cross training. So I'm trying to actually focus on that more this year. So I took a cross country Nordic ski camp over the weekend, which was a 3-day camp to learn how to ski properly. So I'm planning to incorporate that into my training, and I think that it's going to be really good. Something else I'm doing differently this year is I hired a strength coach to work with me, and that's been really helpful. We've only done a couple of sessions, maybe 4 sessions, but he did an assessment, and this is very common for lots of cyclists, is that we don't really engage our core properly. And we tend to have very strong lower backs, and we'll use our lower back instead of our core. So my upper ribs flare out, my pelvis rotates, and then all the strain is on my lower back, and I'll stand with my knees locked. So I'm trying to retrain my body to actually use my transverse abdominis and to actually connect the upper body to the lower body. So it's been really interesting. I'm not doing crunches, I'm not doing planks, I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm doing a bunch of different movement things, and it's different every time. And it's interesting to see this coach's approach to training because I've never done anything like that before.
Right. And would any of that involve weights?
A little bit. Like I said, we've only done a few sessions, but we're using kettlebells. So some of it is actually just to use gravity and to use the weight of the kettlebell to help me with rotation, to get more mobility in my thoracic spine, or just to help push my upper quadrant down so that I can actually use my core. Because if you can pull your upper quadrant up, sometimes you can just cheat and not actually use your core. So the kettlebells have been really interesting, and I've never used them before.
Wow, I'm a big fan. So in that case, how many hours a week then would you spend with, say, your strength coach or your strength and conditioning side of it versus your cycling versus maybe your cross training, which may be skiing or running?
Yeah, so right now I'm spending 2 hours a week in the gym, and I would like to do more, but it's pretty expensive to work with a strength coach. So that's the maximum that I can do. And I think that that's enough. I'm starting to see changes. And then I'm trying to incorporate around 2 to 3 hours of skate skiing per week, which again, I just started doing this week. And then I'm spending probably 4 to 5 hours a week doing yoga. So I'm trying to commit to 4 times a week of doing yoga because that's also really important. And then I'm trying to ride my bike. I mean, again, the bike training needs to be quality, but when you're doing aerobic work, it's really easy to be a little bit tired from other things and still get an aerobic benefit. So I'm training on my bike around 10 to 15 hours a week. So yeah, I'm training 20 plus hours a week right now, including all the cross training.
And is yoga something that you've just introduced as well, or is that something you've been doing for a while?
No, I've been doing yoga for almost a decade, but there's been times where I'm really heavy into it, like right now. And then there's times where I won't do it for a couple of months because once you get out of it, you get a little bit sore whenever you get back into it, and especially in your hamstrings. So I strive to do yoga at least once a week during the season, but sometimes it gets away from me. Or this year I had some injuries that prevented me from doing yoga. So I actually didn't do any yoga for about 4 months, and getting back into it was actually surprisingly longer process than I thought. I lost a lot of my strength. So it's good to be getting that back.
I'm excited because I'm also a yoga instructor and kettlebell instructor as well. So I love to hear that you're doing this. I know you're working with a sports psychologist, and then you also mentioned a strength coach. What other coaches do you work with?
In terms of cycling, I'm self-coached because a lot of times, like when I've tried working with coaches in the past, it's been hard for them to understand the amount of energy, again, the energy that I put out. I don't spend the time recovering like I should. Like I don't spend time laying on the couch. I just don't do it because I don't like it. And I know I need to, but I'm always on the go, and I'm always trying to just think of new ideas, and I'm working, and I love what I do. So I think that it's hard for coaches to really be able to prescribe a weekly training plan because your fatigue level could be different one day from another depending on your stress level. So a good coach, you really need to be in contact almost on a daily basis if you're doing bike workouts, because if you're tired, you have no business doing interval training because it's just going to overtrain you. And that's what would normally happen is I'd work with a coach and then I'd get overtrained. So I've actually gotten a lot faster on my own. And part of it is because I have so much experience. I have 14 years of experience with bike riding and training. So I know my body well enough to know when I need to rest and when I need to push. I do some physiology testing. So there's an awesome group in Kelowna, British Columbia, where I live called Balance Point. And they have the most innovative physiology assessment tests that you can do. So they have their own machine that they invented for your respiratory system. So it gives you real-time data on VO2. It gives you real-time data on the size of each breath you're taking. So like if you're breathing 3 or 4 liters or at whatever respiratory frequency, they test your muscle oxygen in your legs. So there's a bunch of different data points and data markers. So they'll do the test, they'll come back and say, these are the things that came back as weaker. And then they tell me, you need to go work on them. And here's some examples of what you can do. So I integrate that into my training as well.
Awesome. So how often would you do the testing?
I should be doing it probably 4 times a year. But if I'm being totally honest, I'm only doing it once a year.
So then would you basically just go with intuition as to how you feel, as to how you train?
Yeah. And I mean, I look at what I need to work on in a race. So I'm able to assess my race like, okay, am I struggling with the start? Am I struggling with passing? Am I struggling with technical? Am I fading in a really long climb? Like what's going on? So that's what I use to really gauge my training. But I've become an expert with my own body. So like I'm able to judge if like my heart rate, I can tell within 10 minutes or even 5 minutes of a ride if my heart is rested properly. And I can tell if my respiratory system is engaging early. So there's a lot of things that I think coaches teach you about how to learn how to assess your own body and then knowing what to do from there.
And do you track things like power, using a power meter or anything like that when you cycle?
Yep, I track my power and my heart rate, and I will count my respiratory frequency. So how many breaths a minute I'm taking during efforts as well, because that's another marker of how hard you're going is how hard you're breathing, and everybody's different. So I actually, relative to my heart and to my neuromuscular system, my respiratory system is the strongest of the 3. So that's the last system to fatigue. So I definitely keep an eye on all those systems, and I try and make sure that as a well-balanced athlete that I'm training the right one.
And are you well enough disciplined to go, yeah, today's not the day and go home?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I'm so excited whenever it's not the day, because then I can go home and get some other work done, because I'm so passionate about the other things I'm doing that if I don't get to ride my bike, that's okay, because there's a lot of other things I love to do. And now it means I have more time to do it. And to me, that's what having balance is. It's not saying, oh, you know, I should be spending more time here or there, but it's having enough things going on in your life that you aren't so one-dimensional that if one thing goes away, you're completely depressed and that you don't have anything else that brings you joy.
Yeah, I love that. And I assume you've had injuries along the way. Have you ever been injured so badly that you're sort of forced to do something else?
Not necessarily, no. Like my worst injury was actually last year, and it was a foot surgery. So I had like a really bad talar bunion, and just I had crazy scar tissue. So they didn't actually fix the talar bunion itself. It's on the pinky toe side. What they'd have to do is break the bone and reset it. Then I wasn't willing to do that, but they took a massive piece of scar tissue out of my foot. So I actually couldn't walk for a month. Like I had to spend an entire month on the couch. And it sounds horrible, but I actually loved it. I loved it because there was no pressure of, oh, I should be training or I should be doing this. Like the pressure of I should was completely gone. And I was exhausted from just trying to recover from the surgery and from the pain. I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the downtime, and I worked myself up mentally so that I would be in a place where I could enjoy it. But I've like broken bones and had to take 4 to 6 weeks off of mountain biking, but there's always things that you can do. Yeah, I've never been hurt so bad where it's been like 6 months of nothing before.
Even if that ever happens, it sounds like you've got such a balanced life that you could maybe write another book or do something.
Yeah, you know, I think it comes down to where your self-worth comes from. And if your self-worth is 100% tied up with your racing or your training or exercise, then it's really hard whenever you can't do that, because now you don't know who you are and you don't know where to get confidence from and that good feeling from. So if you can find multiple things in your life that you enjoy doing, and you don't even have to be good at them, but just things that you enjoy doing that bring you joy, I think that that actually helps a lot with self-worth and confidence as well.
You're obviously not 20.
I was 20 once, and I definitely am not the same person now that I was then.
Absolutely. And I know a big part of what you do and what you believe in is around your diet. Can you talk through maybe how you sort of changed your diet over the time and how that perhaps has even helped with performance?
Yeah, so it's super interesting. So I'm going to bring up my husband, Matt, again. Like he's been such an amazing influence in my life. So when I met him, it was at a stage race in Canada, and I saw that he was just eating these massive plates of food. And I asked him what he was eating because it looked like a ton of beans and rice and vegetables, and it looked kind of weird to me. And he said, oh, well, I eat a plant-based diet. And I was like, is that the same as vegan? Because I don't think I can handle meeting another vegan, because I was living in Boulder at the time, and vegan, the V word was a bad word back then. And now the connotation and the association with that word is much better. But he told me, I'm doing this for health reasons, and you should check out this documentary called Forks Over Knives. And then he left me alone. And it took me like a good 8 to 9 months before I actually watched it because I was so stubborn and I was so sure of what I thought I was going to hear. So then I finally decided, I should give this a shot. I'll watch this documentary. And then what I saw was that your health, like the things that kill people, cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, all these things are related to diet. And it's not 100% controllable, but there's a lot you can do to improve the outcome of your health. So you don't have to die of those diseases. And that was a huge eye opener for me because one of my big fears is getting cancer and dying young and not getting to live the life that I wanted to live. And another one of my fears was our Western society's perception of aging and being crippled, and old people here aren't the same as old people I've seen around the world in some of my races. Like in Nepal and Sri Lanka, you see 90-year-old women hiking up the side of a mountain carrying a load of sticks. I think that it's important to realize that when people say, oh, I don't want to make it to 90, it's because what their perception of 90 is. So I want to make it to 100 and I want to be healthy and I want to live the best life possible. So that documentary was like, it gave me control back. And I thought, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to see how I feel. But I was worried because I'm an endurance athlete. And what if I get malnourished? What if I don't get enough protein? What if I start sucking in my races? What if I can't train? So there was all these things I was afraid of. So I found people that I looked up to who ate that kind of diet and I connected with them. And that was really helpful. And having a partner that supported me was also really helpful. And I did it gradually. I didn't change overnight. My husband did, but I did not. And I did it gradually. And what I found was that I started eating plant-based a few times a week. And then I realized, well, I actually feel better when I do this. So I'm going to start eating like this more often and more often. And then it got to the point where I just didn't even want to eat that other stuff anymore. And I wanted to eat fully plant-based because of how good it made me feel. And a nice, happy side effect of that was my performance got better. And it wasn't that I changed my diet to become a faster athlete. That was just a side effect of becoming healthier because your body becomes cleaner on the inside. Your gut biota improves because you're feeding the right bacteria. So now you're able to absorb nutrients better. Your blood flow increases better because you're able to reverse the plaque that starts building up even from the age of 10 in your veins and arteries. So now you get better blood flow to your limbs. And my blood pressure too. I always had good blood pressure. It was always like 110 to 115 at the top number. But now my blood pressure is 95 and that is from my diet. So I got healthier and as a result, I got faster. And then I started winning races. I went from trying to get third place, like just dangling, trying to get third place, to winning a lot of races. I really think that a big difference was my diet.
Wow, what a journey. And I'm interested to know, how did your diet actually change? Was it quite, would you say, bad before you became a vegan?
No, it was actually pretty good. Like I didn't eat very many processed foods. I actually didn't really eat very many meats. Only occasionally would I have cheese. So the things that I did eat meat and chicken, which are still meat. I ate those every single day. So I stopped eating meat and fish, like chicken and fish, on a daily basis. I stopped eating cheese. So I would put Parmesan cheese on my pasta or whatever. I stopped drinking milk in my coffee. So I loved cappuccinos. I stopped drinking that. A big thing that I changed is you always hear how good olive oil is for you. And I would put it on everything. I would dump it over everything. And it's so calorie dense and it provides very little in terms of nutrients. I cut way back on my oil consumption. In fact, I hardly use any added oils to my cooking now. I saute in water, and our foods, even plant-based foods, naturally have fat content. So I'm still getting 25 to 30% of my calories from fat without even adding in any fat. So I reduced the amount of fat in my diet by a lot too.
So what would your macro levels look like, assuming you don't measure them, but if you were to, on a, say, daily basis, 30% fat?
Yeah, 30% fat. Like I get around 80 to 100 grams of protein per day. I don't know how many carbohydrates. I don't really track that. I just make sure that I'm getting them from whole food sources. So recently I've been cutting way back on actually even gluten-free brown rice pasta because that's processed food still. So I'm trying to get all my carbohydrates from rice or quinoa or from something that is the wholest grain possible. And yeah, I try to avoid processed foods as much as I can. Like I love oatmeal and just making sure that you're getting as much of the whole grain as possible.
So 50% carbs then maybe, or?
Yeah, probably 50%. I actually did track this for a couple of weeks periodically, so I can't remember the other macros, but I do remember the fat because that was something that I was curious about is, okay, I need to make sure that I'm getting enough fat because you need fat in your diet for hormone production. So that was something that, I wanted to make sure that I was doing because I wasn't adding in any oil. But yeah, like I'm getting enough. And then in terms of fiber, because that was another just question is people joke, oh, well, sometimes vegans don't even get as much fiber as you think that they do. And interestingly enough, Paleolithic man got 70 to 100 grams or more of fiber in their diet because meat is hard to catch and they actually didn't eat it very often. So the joke was, oh, well, vegans these days get less fiber than Paleolithic man. So I actually wanted to see how much fiber I was getting. And I'm getting around 70 to 80 grams of fiber. And I've added even more beans and legumes into my diet. So I'm probably getting even more than that now. And that's so important for your gut health.
And have you done any tracking along the lines of, you mentioned your blood pressure and that sort of seemed to get better as you became a vegan. Have you tracked anything else like, say, hormone levels or even cholesterol levels or anything else?
That's funny you mentioned that. There was someone at my house this morning taking blood. So there's this program that I've been using this year called Inside Tracker. I think it's insidetracker.com, but basically they'll take your blood and then they'll test everything. They'll test all your vitamins and they'll test your hormone level. Like it's the full gamut. The year before that, I had done it with my naturopaths as to get a baseline. But what Inside Tracker does is they try and just recommend dietary changes that you can do as an athlete to say like your C-reactive protein is high. Like what do you do to get inflammation down in your body? So it was interesting because it wasn't perfect, of course. Like I've done 3 now. Those were the best results they've ever seen out of the thousands of athletes that they've tested. And it's because of my diet. So it's pretty cool to see that. And there really hasn't been any major things that I've had to change. And it's funny. Another thing is people will say, oh, well, vegans, they don't have enough DHA because of the types of fats. They're eating omega-3 and omega-6, but it's coming from plants. So their body can't convert ALA into, DHA. And the interesting thing was I had the DHEA of someone 5 to 7 years younger than me. And that's not typical for a vegan. I don't know what that's all about, but that was the most interesting thing that I discovered was this is actually good because that helps you create hormones. It helps you have healthy adrenals. So all that was really good.
Well, was there anything that they sort of suggested that maybe you were insufficient in?
No, no, it actually didn't, which was a surprise.
Wow. So B12, everything else was totally fine.
Yeah, everything was good. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I can't think of anything.
Well, there probably wasn't if they were the best results. There probably wasn't much.
Like the only thing was the DHA for someone my age was a red flag because they just typically don't see someone my age with DHA that high. So I went to my naturopath and I went to my doctor and they're like, actually, this is really good. So because people take DHA supplements to get their DHA high. And so they're like, nope, you're good.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's 4 years after being a vegan?
Yeah, 4 years, 4.5 years.
Excellent. It's really good to get your perspective because we do have a lot of people on the show, a lot of primal sort of eaters who do eat meat, albeit, grass-fed meat, and getting their perspective has been really good as well. So it's great to get a vegan and some stats and some sort of first-hand experience as an athlete about how performance is really actually increased, because I've had a bit of a look around and I haven't seen many studies out there, at least peer review studies, that have tested for vegan diets and performance. Do you know of anything?
I don't, but I could probably look and see. A friend of mine is a world famous dietitian, a plant-based dietitian. Her name's Brenda Davis. And she wrote this amazing book. It's like a textbook called Becoming Vegan. And she's like an encyclopedia. So if there's any test about that or any studies, they would be in her book. So I'll have to have a look. But
excellent. We'll include that in the show notes. That's great.
Yeah, Brenda's awesome. And she actually lives in my town, which was funny. But there's a few things I want to add is, number one, you don't have to eat fully plant-based to get health benefits from it. You just have to eat more fruits, vegetables, legumes, like get Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Die, or get his app, The Daily Dozen. Those are just foods that you need to add into your diet. So if you don't want to give up meat and cheese and you love all that stuff, just start adding in some of these other healthy foods and it'll make a difference. And I understand that not everybody wants to completely give that stuff up, but just trending in the right direction will make a big difference. And number two, I think people who are worried about being like a vegan athlete, the reason why people will get low iron or low energy is because they're not eating a whole food diet. Like you need to make sure that you're not eating processed foods, and you need to make sure that you're eating a lot of different colors and make sure that you're getting balance. And you can do that by, again, checking out, there's a lot of books out there that have lots of great recipes in them that are not junk food. The third thing, I forget what I was going to say, but yeah, just trending in the right direction and having variety in your diet are the key things.
And do you think a lot of people become vegans and then they actually take out processed foods, and that could even be just that move alone could be beneficial?
Oh, absolutely. Like even if you don't want to add more leafy greens into your diet, that's one of the reasons people who switch to like the paleo diet will see a big improvement in their health, is because they cut out all processed foods. That's a great thing, is to not eat processed foods, and you will see a difference. But there's like so many peer-reviewed studies about plant-based diets and health. So if you're interested, check that out. But cutting out processed foods in general is massively helpful.
Excellent. And look, Sonya, you're an absolute inspiration. And I think if I was sort of 20 years, maybe 30 years younger, I would want to become a professional mountain bike cyclist just based on what you're doing and how you do it. What's your hope for the future of women in sport?
You know, I think that it's improved a lot, even in my short time as an athlete, as a female athlete on this planet. There was an ad that came out by one of the bike companies a week ago, and it was about how women need an e-bike so they can keep up with men. And 10 years ago, if that ad had come out, it probably would have just been brushed off. But this caused a global stink. Like people were outraged by this ad because it was sexist. So I actually think that women are getting more respect as athletes moving forward. And I think with a lot of the programs, there's high school mountain bike leagues and the accessibility of other athletes via social media, younger girls, it's easier for them to watch what another female pro athlete is doing. So they have somebody to look up to on a daily basis. And maybe they even talk. Like I respond to every single person that sends me a message on my social media channels. So I've had young girls send me a message asking me about my career. So I think that it's really great that there's opportunities to empower the younger generations of females to show them that, yes, you can do this. And that globally, it's becoming less and less acceptable to disrespect women and to not give women credit for their hard work as athletes.
Awesome. And I know you're doing so much to help people with that. And I heard a rumor that maybe soon in the near future, or maybe long distance future, you might self-publish a book. What would that be about?
It's going to be about mindset. So I don't want to give too much away, but I've raced some pretty crazy events around the world, and I've learned a lot of things about myself and about life from those events. So I think that there's a lot to be told, and for it to be not about biking. Like I don't want it to be about biking. I want it to be about how to live a better life.
Awesome. And just one final question for you before I ask the real question that we're here for. I know you do coaching. Do you do much in terms of online coaching for mountain bikers? And do you sort of expand that to other cyclists? Where are you at with your coaching?
It kind of ebbs and flows. Right now I'm focused on growing a lot of the other parts of my business. So coaching an athlete is a full-time gig, as I mentioned. And when I coach someone, I don't want to do it halfway. So I only have one athlete that I'm coaching right now, and it's actually Reggie Miller, the NBA basketball player.
I know. I heard your podcast with him. That was awesome.
So that's been fun. And, you know, it's really awesome and flattering that people want me to coach them. But I don't want to say yes, because if I say yes, I want to be fully committed to it. So I'm not doing a lot. I'm happy to do mentoring sessions. I'm happy to do consulting sessions. I've done some of that for wellness coaching as well. I'm happy to do that. But what I'm really working on now is developing online courses for a lot of the things that I believe in. That way people can take the course instead of me having to do a one-off, one-on-one basis. That way, if people want to learn about stuff, there's a broader way for them to do it. And then if they have questions about it, they can ask me.
And I guess that's a way to help more people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So yeah, I mean, right now where I'm at, I'm not doing a lot of coaching, but I do enjoy seeing people improve, and I enjoy like teaching people about the things that I'm doing. I'm working on doing that on a broader scale right now.
Great. And I've heard also that there may be some cool products coming out. So would the best thing to do then, our listeners, go to your website, which obviously we'll put in the show notes, and then sign up for your newsletter? Is that the best way to keep in contact?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, SonyaLooney.com. There's a newsletter that pops up, and I actually should be sending out more. I say once a month, but it's actually less than that. But yeah, my newsletter will be a great spot. And then all my social media channels, especially Instagram and Facebook, and Twitter as well. I try and keep in touch multiple times a day and let people know what I'm up to. So if there is a really cool pair of socks or a poster or a new podcast that I recorded that comes out every week, it's a great way to just keep in touch with all those things.
Cool. And now one last question for you. Do you have a tattoo?
Nope. I got lots of scars, so those are my tattoos.
That's funny. Another pro cyclist said the same thing. So is there any reason why you don't?
That's a good question. I just can't think of anything that I want to have on my body forever. And to be honest, I like my body the way it is. Like, I actually think tattoos look really cool on people, but it's just not my thing.
Yeah, and I guess if you want to be brave and do epic shit on it, you just get some socks, right?
That's right. You can change the color.
Exactly. Cool, Sonya. Look, thanks so much for coming on the show. We loved what you said, and our listeners are going to love it.
Ali, thank you so much for having me on your show, and good luck with your move to New York City, and maybe we'll get to connect. I went there for the first time as an adult this year in May, and I absolutely fell in love with the place. So I can't wait to go back, and hopefully we can connect when I'm there next.
Absolutely. For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.